September the 30th, 2014. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Supervisor Avalos. Avalos present. Supervisor Breed. Breed present. Supervisor Campos.
Present.
Campos present. President Chu.
Present.
Chu present. Supervisor Cohen.
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell.
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim. Kim present. Supervisor Marr.
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener.
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee.
Present.
Yee present. Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Could you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, are there any communications?
I have no communications, Mr. President.
And if you could read our consent agenda.
Items 1 through 17 comprise the consent agenda. These items are considered routine and will be acted upon by a single roll call vote. Unless the supervisor requests discussion of the matter, it shall be removed and considered separately.
Colleagues, would anyone like to sever any of these items? Roll call vote on the first 17 items.
On the consent agenda, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Chu.
Aye.
Chu, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Wiener.
Supervisor Wiener.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Avalos.
Supervisor Avalos.
Supervisor Avalos, aye. You have 11 ayes.
Those ordinances are passed either on the final or first readings. And with that, next item.
Item 18 is an ordinance to designate the giant sequoia tree at 3066 Market Street as a landmark tree pursuant to Public Works Code Section 810.
Same house, same call. This ordinance is finally passed. Item 19.
Item 19 is a resolution to approve and authorize the Treasure
Gmail.
Island Development Authority to enter into a modification of the cooperative agreement with the United States Navy to extend the agreement to September 30th, 2015.
Same house, same call. This resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 20 is a resolution authorizing the option to extend the term of a lease for 5 years at 617 Mission Street, 109 New Montgomery Street with the Connor Children's Trust Number 2 for the Department of Children's Support Services for approximately $1.5 million total rent in the first year.
Same house, same call. This resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 21 is a resolution authorizing the Department of Public Health to submit an application to continue to receive funding for the Ryan White Act HIV/AIDS Emergency Relief Grant Program, requesting approximately $36 million in HIV emergency relief program funding for the San Francisco eligible metropolitan area.
Same house, same call. This resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 22 is a resolution authorizing the Department of Public Health to submit an application for calendar year 2015 to continue to receive funding for the Comprehensive HIV Prevention Program grant, requesting approximately $8 million in HIV prevention funding for San Francisco.
Same house, same call. This item is approved. Next item.
Item 23 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Department of Public Health to accept and expend a grant in an amount of approximately $380,000 to participate in a program entitled Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Kenya Monitoring and Evaluation.
Same house, same call. This resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 24 is a resolution authorizing an increase of the principal amount of the Wastewater Enterprise Commercial Paper Program to a principal amount not to exceed $500 million to be issued from time to time by the PUC to finance various capital projects benefiting the wastewater enterprise.
Same house, same call. The resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 25 is a resolution authorizing the execution and acceptance of a residential master lease for the real property located at 250 Kearney Street with a monthly initial rent of approximately $162,000 for a 10-year term.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I have some questions for Department of Real Estate. I see Director John Updike here. Thank you for being here. And also thank you for your work in moving this forward, along with former Supervisor Bevan Dufty. It is really amazing that we will finally be opening 250 Kearney Street to house many of our homeless veterans who are currently on our streets. It's a really, really exciting project. I just have a couple of questions. I do have a lot of the master leases for SRO hotels in my district. And, the one thing, of course, that struck me that was in the Budget and Legislative Analyst Report was, of course, the cost of the rent, which is significantly higher than most of the rent for our other master leases, which, of course, began at a very different time and place in the real estate market. So I get the increase. I had some questions about the units themselves. I know that they have bathrooms, and I was wondering if they would also come equipped with mini refrigerators or microwaves. Like, what are the appliances that will be coming with those units?
Thank you, Supervisor. John Updike, Director of Real Estate. I'm actually going to allow Amanda or Bevan to address a couple of those questions because I know they are working on a collaborative effort relative to some furnishings. But by and large, you're right. That's the one unique aspect of this location with individual bathrooms for each unit. But I believe we are working on a venture. So if you'd like to explain that further.
Hi, Supervisor Amanda Freed from the Mayor's Office of Hope. Every tenant, when they move in, will get a mini fridge with a freezer compartment and a microwave, and all rooms will be furnished with a dresser and a bed and all the linens necessary.
Okay. No, that was good to hear because actually, we have a lot of students in our office, and I was asking them what the going rate of rent is for small studios and efficiency unit. And this is priced a little bit higher than some of the units that they were looking at, but they said if there were hot plates or additional amenities, that would make more sense.
There's also a large communal kitchen, as well as laundry, two different laundry spaces in the building.
Is that a paid laundry facilities?
Most likely, yes. It'd be up to property management how they want to run it.
Okay. And my second question, and I don't know if this is for your office or for John Updike, something that we have been really pushing, of course, is now that we've had master leases for over 10 years, we're discovering some of kind of the gaps that we missed out when we first signed the master lease. The major piece of that, of course, is the renovation. And I saw that we incorporated a minimum amount, that the city would pay in when there were capital improvements to be made. But I guess my question is, what assurances do we have when, like, an elevator breaks down? Although I'm glad there's a new elevator in here. But when an elevator breaks down, what is the expectation in terms of time frame that would be fixed? Are we also asking the property owner to keep a capital reserve, maintain a capital reserve fund so that, 10 years, 15 years down the line, when things do start to break down in these buildings, which is what I'm seeing with a lot of our SRO hotels right now that we have master leases with, what we get from the property owners is that we don't have a reserve fund to fix that elevator, to make that major improvement. And so, we've been really pushing with our new leases to make sure that we mandate a minimum reserve so that in the future won't be an issue today because it's a new building, but 10 years down the line when we're still master leasing, that we have the capacity to push on property owners and they'll have the funding to finance it.
Supervisor, you're correct. Our current inventory of SRO master leases is an older inventory, aging assets. The unique aspect here is we have a fairly brand new building with brand new infrastructure. So, we have been involved in that process of delivery of those and inspection of those units. And before we take possession to the property, we will ensure everything is operating to our specifications. So that ensures the capital delivered that's fresh and new that we will then inherit the maintenance responsibility for to a large extent is to our satisfaction. Secondly, it's a 10-year lease. And so over that 10-year life, we could expect some repairs, but we shouldn't anticipate any massive failures. The good news is any of the items that have warranties that go with them, of course, we will benefit from those warranties. That, again, is not the norm with any of our existing SRO inventory. And then lastly, I want to speak to the cap. What we've done here is restructured the normal cap that you have seen in master leases. Normally, we address caps on a per-event basis. What that has led to is a lot of discussion, in some cases litigation, over what is an event. And that has really meant the cap has been almost meaningless for us. We simply continue to pay for improvements. By capping the amount on an annual basis, no matter what the maintenance and repair expense, we are assured both from a budget standpoint and just from a policy standpoint that we know what our fiscal commitment is, and beyond that commitment, the owner must provide the funds. That provides an incentive for the owner to ensure that there is a sufficient reserve, because the lease itself has a number of requirements of timeliness of response and commercial reasonableness of delivery of the improvements.
That's really great to hear. Could you go into more specifics? And then I know that I have other colleagues with questions, so I don't want to monopolize the time. Could you go into some of the specifics about the expectation if there's a breakdown in the building, if there's a breakdown in the elevator? That's the one we get the most complaints about. What is the expectation, and what's in the lease that will ensure that they will respond in a timely fashion?
To some degree, it's not actually the lease that per se is the dictator here, but the request for proposals that will be coming out for our service provider. So we have the wraparound services for the residents, but also as part of that, property management services are being delivered by a third party, which will be under our control.
I see.
And so we will, by and large, dictate that response.
I see.
So I think that level of control will give us assurance that if there is a problem, it will be attended to immediately.
So in that case, and actually that's great to hear, so we'll be able to dictate the timeliness of the response. In that case, if we were to, and I'm really looking way into the future because I know this is a new building today, when there is a breakdown, let's say with the elevator, and property management goes ahead and fixes it, we pay that minimum amount, and then do we just bill the extra amount to the property owner? Is that kind of the system that we're envisioning?
Right. There's a process called for in the lease where a certain repair, once it's above a certain amount, there just requires a communication between owner and tenant, city and owner, to ensure that the scope is approved by both parties to effect the repairs, and so there's no miscommunication about whether this is under the cap or over the cap, and who ultimately pays.
And an agreement on the list of those maintenance fixes that we've already been seeing with our other hotels.
Embedded within the agreement, essentially.
And I see Mr. Patel here, and I do want to thank him for his work. He's actually been a great property owner, and it's not that I'm worried about this building, but we are setting a precedent with other future master leases. Not all of our property owners are as responsive as Mr. Patel is, and I just want to make sure that we set a structure that we can be consistent about into the future, so that even though I won't be in office or I won't be supervisor in 10 years, I don't want to, I'm dealing with, I think, or managing kind of, the fallouts of the buildings today of leases that were set a long, long time ago, and I want to make sure that we have put those precautions into those leases. So thank you for your response.
And Supervisor, if I could just add that there are going to be 2 elevators in the building. There's one currently operating, and there will be a second elevator, which is great to have that backup.
Thank you.
Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, President Chu. Thank you, Supervisor Kim, for your line of questioning. I have comments more than a question. First of all, I want to thank the folks that put this package together, because the need to help out the homeless veterans is great, and this is a great opportunity for the city to respond to that. So when I first saw this, especially with the wraparound services, I was thrilled to death, that we're going to move forward. Then I looked at the sticker price, in terms of the master lease amount, and figured out sort of per unit how much it would cost. And then I got a little nervous because it seemed a little high to me. And it's not to say that homeless veterans don't deserve this, but what I was worried about was not just this particular facilities or housing, but what impact does that have on other SROs and driving up the prices? Because I guess I'm still in the mindset of 15 years ago, and people were paying still around $200 or whatever, and all of a sudden you're paying over $1,000, or was it $1,200? And so I was a little worried about that. And then even though they said it was remodeled and so forth, everybody knows that you could say remodel, it could mean one thing or it could mean another thing. So I was actually not ready to support it. And before I made my final decision, fortunately, I have an expert on housing on staff. So I asked him to go down to actually look at the units and see what the remodel really looks like and the size of the units and so forth. And so he was able to go down, that's Matthias, and looked at the units, and he reassured me that it may be a little high, wasn't as high as I thought it would be for what the people were going to be getting. The units are very lovely, remodeled very low, and very tastefully. And so, because of that, I'm more than willing to support this at this point. So, thank you for all the work that you guys put into this, and hopefully, we'll have real soon another 135 people off the streets.
Supervisor Farrell.
Thanks. Thanks, President Chu, and I want to, as a co-sponsor of this, I just want to say a few words of thanks to the people involved, and appreciate the line of questioning from Supervisor Kim. First of all, to Bevan Dufty, to Amanda Freed, thank you for all of your hard work on this. For Mr. Updike, for all of his hard work. I know Joyce Crum was here during our Budget Committee hearing on this last week. This is something, as we talk about housing our homeless veterans, this is something that obviously I think we all agree should be a huge priority here in San Francisco. I think this project in particular has a number of really positive aspects. Obviously in a different area of town, which I think is great in order to kind of talk about the wraparound services that they're going to be getting. This is obviously in huge partnership with our federal government, and the VASH vouchers and the VA have stepped up big time in funding about 70% of this, the cost of the project and a lot of the ongoing services. And also, I'm very cognizant of the fact that this is more expensive than previous examples. But also really want to thank the SAMs, the owners of the property, who had, I believe it was 8 competing offers to use this for different sources and for different uses, and chose to keep it with the city of San Francisco to house our homeless veterans. So I think it's a great partnership, and really look forward to seeing the effect this will have here in San Francisco.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. I want to echo Supervisor Farrell's comments also as a sponsor of this legislation, really on two fronts. One, colleagues, this was a property at 250 Kearny in the heart of my district, which had been known as one of the worst SROs in the entire city for a number of years. And I want to thank the city staffers that worked with my office in my first few years to help focus attention on this. And then secondly, as someone who, like Supervisor Farrell, has been very committed to addressing homelessness among our veterans community, a number of years ago, I worked with Swords to Plowshare and others to carry the legislation at 150 Otis. We have an ability in San Francisco. We can truly, I think, aspire to hopefully end homelessness among our veterans community within a few short years. And I want to thank Bevan Dufty, Mr. Updike, the community of providers that have worked closely with the city toward this goal, a goal that our president has set and a goal that I think we all absolutely believe in here in the city of St. Francis. So thank you to the team of folks that have done this. And with that, colleagues, I do hope you'll be able to support this measure. Any further comments? Supervisor Cohen.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm excited to see this item before us, and I hope that we'll be able to bring more items to address our homeless crisis. And I'm thrilled whether we are addressing the homeless crisis as it relates to veterans, LGBT, or just transgendered folks. Either way, we have a serious problem here in the city, and we really need to do a better job of stepping up and providing thoughtful service for everyone. So to the Hope Department, thank you very much. To the property sponsor, I greatly appreciate it. And to the mayor's office, Updike, and those that are kicking the money in. This is great. I applaud you, and I look forward to continuing to work because, as you know, we've got a growing problem, particularly growing on the southeast side, as we continue to see things change along the southeastern, southern part of Market. So this is great, a step in the right direction. All right.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Mr. President. Without repeating what's been said, I want to thank Bevan Dufty, his staff, and everyone who's worked to make this possible. As we see the economic disparity that people are living with on a daily basis, it's really important that here in the wealthiest city in the country that we don't forget about those who are the most vulnerable. So I'm glad to see that, and want to thank Supervisor Dufty for his work in making that happen.
And with that, colleagues, can we take a roll call on this matter?
On item 25, Supervisor Breed. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Chu.
Aye.
Chu, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Aye. Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. You have 11 ayes.
The resolution is adopted. Item 26.
Item 26 is a resolution approving the Seventh Amendment to the Armed and Unarmed Security Services Agreement with Cypress Security to increase the contract for a total contract amount not to exceed $35.9 million and extending the term for 6 months.
Same house, same call. This resolution is adopted. Item 27.
Item 27 is a motion supporting an amendment to the MTA's 15-16 operating budget to provide free Muni service to low and moderate income 19 to 22-year-old students enrolled in the Special Education Services Program.
Same house, same call. This item is approved. Next item.
Item 28 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to add web series to a schedule of film production use fees and to establish notice requirements to affected residents and businesses for film productions that will result in parking or traffic obstructions lasting 4 consecutive hours or more.
Supervisor Cohen.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, thanks for hearing this item today. The legislation before you is pretty straightforward and clean. It will require the filming companies to provide notification to the neighborhood and the neighboring businesses and residents within a 150-foot radius should their filming production activities be expected to close streets, obstruct traffic, or public parking spots. We've recently seen an increase to the number of film production all around the city, and I think this really has to do with the great leadership within their film department as well as the Film Commission. While this is a great thing that our city is highlighted in these films and movies and commercials that are, of course, seen around the world, it's equally important that we provide ample notice and information to the residents and businesses that might be and are impacted by these film production companies. Now, many of these productions result in closures of heavily utilized street and areas that can often cause unnecessary disruptions in everyday people's lives. So I've heard from many constituents about the lack of outreach and notification to neighboring businesses and residents when film productions are taking place in the neighborhood. It's my hope that this legislation will bring will bridge the communication gap that provides residents and businesses with the information that they need to ably prepare for any disruptions caused by the filming productions. Now, today I'm introducing 3 amendments to the legislation. When the item was heard in committee last week, I heard from the Film Commission, and since then, many members of the film community, that there is a need for some flexibility in the legislation for extreme circumstances in which a 72-hour notification window is simply not possible. So to address this concern, the First Amendment will add a clause regarding, quote, feasibility in the legislation. The Second Amendment that I'm introducing will clarify how feasibility is defined. In this particular case, the noticing requirement will not apply where prior notice is infeasible due to circumstances that are specified in the Film Commission's notification guidelines. The Third Amendment requires that the Film Commission establish a set of guidelines which would address and outline circumstances when the noticing requirement is, quote, infeasible. Now, the Commission is expected to develop these guidelines 30 days after the effective date of this legislation. The executive director would then report back to the Board of Supervisors with the content of the guidelines for further discussion. Colleagues, I hope to have your support on these amendments today, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Supervisor Cohen has made a motion to make several amendments. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Supervisor Kim. Any discussion on the amendments? Without objection, the amendments are adopted. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, and thank you, Supervisor Cohen, for doing that amendment. I came into the Land Use Committee prepared to vote for the legislation. because I do think that there should be notice of parking removal ahead of time. It's just a matter of good practice, and we want to make sure that while we're fostering and embracing our film industry, both large films and documentaries, independent films, web series, and so on and so forth, that we're also respecting our neighborhoods. And so I came into committee intending to vote for it. After the feasibility language was removed, I voted against the measure because I thought it didn't provide the needed flexibility, understanding that there are times when 72 hours notice does not work for perfectly legitimate reasons. I think it's important to put this in context that the film industry matters a lot in San Francisco. It matters because of the national and international portrayal of our city, which is very, very beneficial to San Francisco. It matters because it allows us to have that aspect of the arts world, especially the smaller and independent films. We want that kind of activity and filming to happen in San Francisco. And in addition, the film industry creates jobs, and especially blue-collar jobs and jobs that don't necessarily require an advanced engineering degree. And so it's something that we should be embracing. And the large productions, I think, can absorb a lot more regulation than the small and independent productions. And we want to make sure that all of these films are able to happen in San Francisco. My read of these amendments that we just adopted is that they do provide significant latitude to the Film Commission to be able to have that flexibility, and I appreciate Supervisor Cohen going down that path. I think it's totally fine for the Commission to have to put out some sort of document or bulletin stating these are the general circumstances where we'll go below 72 hours. But in the end, it's in the discretion of the Commission to do that, understanding that any bulletin that gets put out, there'll probably need to be catch-all language because you can't ever fully anticipate all the twists and turns that will happen during the course of a filming production. And so I do think that this provides enough flexibility and discretion to the Commission. I think it's important for the film industry to understand that that is the intent, I believe, of this board, to provide that flexibility to the Film Commission. This should not be construed in any way as San Francisco not being fully accepting of filming here. This is simply trying to make sure that we're also being responsible towards neighbors who are impacted by these productions. So I'll be supporting this today. Thank you.
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I didn't realize that the director of the Film Commission was here in the chamber. I just wanted to acknowledge her leadership. Thank you, Susanna Robbins, for your leadership. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance is passed on the first reading as amended. Item 29.
Item 29 is a motion confirming the mayor's appointment of Jeff Kositsky to the Treasure Island Development Authority Board of Directors for the unexpired portion of a 4-year term ending April 28th, 2018.
Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, President Chu. I just wanted to thank the mayor for this great suggestion and appointment. I think Jeff Kositsky has been a tremendous expert in helping homeless people have dignity and pathways out of homelessness, from work with the community housing partnerships to the Hamilton Family Center, but even work in green jobs and developing kind of a new economy with better jobs that lift people out of poverty. And I don't know if my colleagues know his background too, but he's worked not only kind of in our city, but also from Austin to Sacramento to Nicaragua in supporting communities, especially low-income communities, develop stable housing with dignity. So I just wanted to thank the mayor for appointing Jeff Kositsky to the Treasure Island Development Authority. I think working with tie-dye and the low-income populations on Treasure Island, he's a really great addition to the TIDA board. Thank you.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I also wanted to recognize Jeff as well for his incredible work in our district for many, many years as the former executive director of Community Housing Partnership, which are the property managers of the affordable housing sites there now, and now at Hamilton Family Shelter, working with so many of our families that are on our streets, moving in and out of transitional housing and our shelter system, which is actually the very population that we house on Treasure Island, that we're fortunate to house on Treasure Island. So I do want to thank the mayor as well for his appointment. Also want to recognize John Elberling, who served in that seat for many, many, many years, was the affordable housing advocate on that island and expert, and want to thank him for his time and service on the TIDA board, and look forward to welcoming Jeff and working with him on many more years on Treasure Island.
I want to also echo the comments of our colleagues and acknowledge Supervisor Farrell.
Thanks, and I'll be quick. I just want to, say Jeff has been such an amazing person to work with as we've done a lot of hearings and legislation this year on our homelessness. Jeff is an incredible advocate, just one of the true blue, down-to-earth, great-hearted people here in San Francisco that does such great work for our community, and just couldn't be more supportive of this appointment.
Thank you, Supervisors. On this item, can we take this item same house, same call? Without objection, the motion is approved unanimously. Item 30.
Item 30 is a motion appointing Julene Johnson, term ending April 30th, 2015, to the Commission of Animal Control and Welfare.
Same house, same call. This motion is approved. Colleagues, why don't we go to our 2:30 special order? I understand that we have an item to be introduced, a commendation by Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, and it's my understanding that this is also being co-sponsored by President David Chu and Supervisor David Campos as well. It is really my privilege and my honor to be recognizing the couple that is standing here today. First, Lieutenant Dennis Cornell and his partner, Jonathan Raley, on the occasion of their legal marriage here in City Hall, which will take place just after they get this commendation right outside of Chambers. Dennis and Jonathan met almost 8 years ago through the Catholic Church. Jonathan sang in the church choir, and Dennis also worked for the church. Their faith was a bond that drew them together as friends, and their friendship grew into love that we are going to commemorate here today in City Hall. These two very special men have served our country and our communities in different and invaluable ways. Jonathan as a teacher of religion, who inspired his young students with his lessons about how the church can be an instrument to bring love and acceptance and support to all of its members, really the true mission, I believe, behind church and Christianity. And Dennis, who is an ordained minister, as well as a licensed social worker. Dennis also served in our Army, and I want to thank you for your years of service on behalf of this country, fighting for our community, and provided much-needed mental health services to our servicemen and servicewomen in combat zone who are dealing with post-traumatic stress, as well as the trauma inevitably visited upon them for living and serving in our heavy combat areas. He currently provides mental health counseling and support to homeless veterans in the Veterans Administration, and hopefully we'll be able to house many of your clients in the lease that we just approved today at 250 Kearny Street. And I think, as the U.S. continues to engage globally and we send more of our men and women out throughout the world, we're certainly now seeing them here in San Francisco because the city is a place of refuge for so many members of our community. And it's often heartbreaking to meet young men on our streets that served our country, that are now homeless, not getting the services and the recognition for the sacrifice that they made on behalf of our country. And also the incredible trauma, as you counsel with, that many of these men and women have engaged with and are having trouble now managing and really being able to come to peace with now that they're back as citizens. So, like so many others, Dennis and Jonathan came to San Francisco from their home in Kentucky, so welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And this remarkable couple is planning on beginning their marriage equality advocacy tour of the remaining states where same-sex marriage has not been legally recognized immediately after their marriage ceremony here today. In fact, that is their honeymoon and their idea of the perfect honeymoon. We wish you all the happiness in the world as you begin this journey together, and I want to thank you in advance for your efforts to advocate for equality for all. I also want to recognize Lieutenant Dan Choi, who is going to be presiding over your ceremony right afterwards, and I understand that Jason Brock is also here to sing a short excerpt of a song prior to you speaking and accepting this commendation on behalf of the board. But before that, I want to give Supervisor David Campos and President David Chu an opportunity to speak as well.
Supervisor Campos.
Well, I want to thank Supervisor Kim for this commendation, and I'm so honored to see this couple here. And I think that oftentimes we forget how monumental a change we as members of the LGBTQ community have seen in terms of the right to marry. And having gone through that myself with my long-term partner, now husband, I can tell you that even if you've been together for a long time, that there is something special about being able to call your love, your husband, your spouse. There's a special significance here because, as you know, this is where Harvey Milk served, and where Supervisor Avalos, at the end of this, the last seat near the public, that's where Harvey sat. And, Harvey has always been here in spirit, and I'm sure that he is smiling, looking down. And what I love about all the weddings that happen in City Hall, which is, incredible to see on a daily basis, that's that so many happen right in front of the Harvey Milk statue. And I think it's only fitting. So congratulations. And of course, you had Dan Choi and Jason Brock, that doesn't get any better than that. So well done.
And I want to echo our colleagues and first of all, welcome you to the board chamber, welcome you here to City Hall. I do understand you'll be having a reception at our Board of Supervisors conference room, room 278, and we are honored with your presence. Thank you also for your service to our country, despite a military that for too many years did not have policies that reflected, I think, the values of San Francisco, but given that you are here, it's wonderful to have you here. If you ever change your mind, we'd love you to consider moving to our city, but we also understand that it is important for us to have ambassadors of service and change throughout our country. So with that, Jason, are you ready?
This is in recognition of the love that's being shared and celebrated. And I will always love you. I will always love you. Oh, you, my darling, you. Oh, I'll always love you.
Before you speak, I actually forgot to introduce Jason. Jason is one of our local celebrities here in San Francisco. He was featured on The X Factor, representing our city and our county, and he continues to perform throughout local venues, so please catch his show. He's an amazing singer. Thank you, Jason, for being here.
He should have won.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Supervisors. We really appreciate this commendation. This past Saturday, the 27th of September, my husband and Jonathan Rayleigh and I had the most beautiful wedding ceremony that we ever had before 175 of our closest family and friends in Louisville, Kentucky. But because we live in Kentucky, our love is illegal. Our love doesn't count in Kentucky. 10 years ago, our type of love, which I like to consider normal human love, was constitutionally banned by voters of our state. The ban was overturned by a federal judge earlier this year. However, our Democratic governor decided to appeal the federal ruling because, as he stated, and I quote, "Only opposite-sex couples can procreate, thus ensuring a stable birth rate and the state's long-term economic stability. Governor Beshear used taxpayer money to pay for a private law firm to appeal this ruling due to our Attorney General's refusal to be a part of that appeal. Given that climate in Kentucky, Jonathan and I decided to come to San Francisco to make our love legal, the place where our idol, Harvey Milk, fought tirelessly for human rights. We asked Army First Lieutenant and hero Dan Choi to help us with this. As you know, he will officiate our wedding at around 4:30 today, right outside these doors. Because of Dan's efforts in the process to repeal the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, I can stand here today as a member of the U.S. Army and openly profess my love for my husband without worrying for being discharged. Now, I have 2 biological children from a previous opposite-sex marriage that I was in, so I guess I did contribute to the long-term economic stability of Kentucky. Jonathan has taken on a step-parent role and has taken on 8-year-old Mara and 3.5-year-old Max as his own, and we are a family. And we want to thank Supervisor Kim and all the rest of the supervisors for allowing us to publicly show our love today in your beautiful city. As we travel wherever the Army takes us, we want to be another example for the rest of the country. That just because Jonathan and I both are male, that does not mean we can't love each other or be a family. We need to remember that love is louder, and love wins today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim, and congratulations to the couple. And with that, Mr. Clerk, why don't we go to roll call?
Do you want to go to the committee reports first?
Why don't we go to our committee reports?
Items 31 and 32 were considered by the Government Audit and Oversight Committee at a regular meeting on Thursday, September 25th, and were forwarded as committee reports. Item 31 was a resolution responding to the presiding judge of the Superior Court on the findings and recommendations contained in the 1314 Civil Grand Jury Report entitled Inquiry into the Operation and Programs of the San Francisco Jails.
Supervisor Breed.
Thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to, as the chair of the Government Audit and Oversight Committee, I just wanted to thank my fellow committee members, President Chu and Supervisor Tang, for their work on developing these responses to the civil grand jury. There'll be more to come, but if you hadn't had an opportunity to review the reports provided to us by the civil grand jury, they are excellent reports with many recommendations. Although we're required to respond to these reports within a certain time by the board, we will be holding other hearings on matters that are of still concern to members of the civil grand jury. They commit a year of their lives studying these departments and researching information and looking for ways in which the government could make changes in order to be more transparent and open in its public process. So I want to commend the members of the civil grand jury and all of their hard work on these reports. And before you have our official responses, and there will be more to come. But just wanted to thank them for their hard work.
And with that, colleagues, can we take this item same house, same call? This resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 32 is a resolution responding to the presiding judge of the Superior Court on the findings and recommendations contained in the 1314 Civil Grand Jury Report entitled The Mayor's Office of Housing, Under Pressure and Challenge to Preserve Diversity.
Same house, same call, colleagues. Without objection, this resolution is adopted. Item 33.
Item 33 was considered by the Land Use and Economic Development Committee at the regular meeting on Monday, September 29th, and forwarded to the board as a committee report. It's an urgency ordinance to approve an interim zoning moratorium to prohibit the conversion or replacement of PDR uses in the proposed central south of Market Plan area for 45 days. And just to note that this is on final passage, not on first reading.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Chu. It is exciting to be able to introduce the first of many initiatives to come out of the compromise agreement between my office and the mayor's office, memorialized in Proposition K, to build more affordable housing here in San Francisco. Beyond just building more affordable housing and also preserving and taking off existing rent-controlled buildings off the speculative market. Another key piece of this agreement was to also address some of the gentrification concerns in our neighborhoods that we are seeing in the hot office real estate market today. The controls that I am introducing today with the mayor prohibit the conversion of buildings that are currently identified as production, distribution, and repair in the Central Soma area plan, bounded by Market Street on the north, Townsend Street on the south, 2nd Street on the east, and 6th Street on the west, while the planning process is currently underway. As you know, colleagues, this is currently in the draft environmental impact review stage. Our policy goal is to encourage the preservation of these PDR spaces and to support no net new loss of PDR in the area. The South of Market, as you often hear from me, is a rich and vibrant neighborhood with a mix of uses, and PDR is an important element of that mix. This issue was most recently highlighted a couple of weeks ago when Kilroy made an announcement that they would be purchasing the Flower Market on 6th and Brannan. The Flower Mart is the second largest flower mart in the country and one of only 5 wholesale markets in the nation. These interim controls would prohibit any conversion at the Flower Mart, a market, a PDR use, and any other PDR spaces in the Central Soma plan as the city engages in the full-scale and comprehensive planning process to figure out how we're going to include all the variety of uses that our city would like to see in this neighborhood. We know that PDR spaces and jobs provide an important vehicle, particularly for our working class community, because they provide living wage jobs to individuals in our city that may not have college degrees or higher education, although they may as well. Even a couple of weeks ago, when I met with a variety of different neighborhood associations and tenants associations, I heard from many members who had either family members or friends that worked at the Flower Mart and were concerned about the Flower Mart moving to Oakland if it was displaced. These interim controls, as I mentioned, are coming out of the housing balance and housing production compromise that the mayor's office and my office engaged in over the month of July. We know that growth is a positive for the city and is bringing additional revenue, office, and residential units in this building. But we also know that it's impacting our neighborhoods, and we want to work with the mayor's office on a housing action and neighborhood stabilization plan to both increase affordable housing and stabilize our neighborhoods and the very things that we love about San Francisco. In addition to helping to preserve PDR space in Central Soma, another reason to introduce these interim controls is so that we have the opportunity to take a careful look at our land use in the South of Market. I'm really excited that the mayor's office has committed to making sure that we are able to build 33% affordable housing in this new area plan, something that we have not been able to accomplish without redevelopment as a tool, but we're excited to come up with all the creative uses and means to make sure that we can hit that without redevelopment. And we also want to make sure that we are considering land uses for PDR and affordable housing in the Central Soma carefully, and that we do not want to be approving projects while this planning process is still taking place. And there's certainly a lot of pressure in this neighborhood as real estate is looking in this area to fast-pace some of their projects before our plan finally goes through. So what does this moratorium do? The interim zoning moratorium urgency ordinance would prevent the planning department and the commission from issuing an approval or authorization to change or replace PDR by a non-PDR use in the proposed Central Soma area plan. This legislation would exempt the following areas and the following projects from the controls. 1, the C3 zone district. 2, proposed projects that comprise of 100% affordable housing as defined in the Planning Code sections 415.1. Properties containing any of the following PDR uses that we feel are not the highest use for their land: gas stations, parking lot, or self-storage. Projects subject to a development agreement under Administrative Code Chapter 56 and the California Government Code Section 65864, and projects that have submitted an environmental evaluation case in zoning areas where conversions are currently allowed, so where office is allowed, to the planning department on or before September 1st. These controls, because it is a moratorium and not a CU, will only be in place for 45 days as required by law. Our intent is to renew these controls at the end of the 45 days and to extend the controls until the Central Soma plan is finally adopted. First, I do want to recognize the mayor and his office for their commitment to making our compromise agreement a reality today. While we were on recess, the mayor already committed $3 million to the Neighborhood Stabilization Trust, which will allow us to purchase existing rent-controlled units, buildings, and take them off the speculative market. And also for his support for this interim controls. I also want to recognize, of course, our co-sponsors on the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Avalos, Campos, President Chu, Supervisor Marr, and of course Supervisor Cohen, who has also introduced her own interim controls to protect PDR in her district. Actually, while she was doing that, we were inspired by her work to include this in our negotiations with the mayor's office. And of course, I want to recognize someone that I forget too often, despite her immense amount of work in this arena, April Veneracion in our office, who rushed with the city attorney's office and the planning department to make sure we could introduce this in September to showcase our commitment to making these negotiations real. John Elberling from Todco, Angelica Kambande from SOMCAN, also for their work in the neighborhood to make sure we had a comprehensive vision and plan for how we both stabilize San Francisco and build more affordable housing. So colleagues, I ask for your support. Thank you.
Unless there's further discussion, colleagues, can we take this item same house, same call? Without objection, this being an urgency ordinance, this ordinance is finally passed. And with that, why don't we go to roll call?
First time roll call is Supervisor Campos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. And today I simply want to note that this coming Monday at 10 a.m., there will be a federal trial here in Federal District Court concerning my relocation assistance ordinance, which this Board of Supervisors passed with a supermajority. Judge Charles Breyer will hear the case in courtroom 6 on the 17th floor of the federal building at 450 Golden Gate Avenue. As you may recall, by a supermajority of this board, we enacted the relocation assistance ordinance in April of this year. The ordinance provides that when landlords make use of the Ellis Act to withdraw their residential units from the rental market, they must compensate the renters that they evict with the difference between the tenant's current rent and 2 years' worth of rent at a comparable unit in San Francisco. The new ordinance also creates 2 administrative appeals processes to protect small property owners from undue burdens. One avenue appeal would enable property owners using the Ellis Act to challenge the controller's rent differential calculation, and another process would allow landlords to petition for relief from tenant relocation assistance payments when they can show evidence of financial hardship. Landlords are free to pursue both appeals. This legislation has been an important part of the solution to San Francisco's affordability crisis. We in my office have heard many reports that the law has allowed so many tenants to continue to live in San Francisco after being evicted, despite the current astronomical rental rates here in San Francisco. Because of the importance of this law, many in our long-term middle-income residents are still here, and we know that this law is an essential part of the solution to address the affordability crisis that we're facing. I have a great deal of confidence in the City Attorney's Office, and I want to thank Christine Van Aken, who has been working extremely hard on this matter, and I want to thank City Attorney Herrera and his entire staff for making the defense of this law a priority. We believe that we will prevail, but irrespective of what happens in court, we are confident that at the end of the day, this law will be protected by the courts. This is a legal case that goes beyond the issue of relocation and really goes to the very question of whether or not working people, middle-income people, can be allowed to live in San Francisco. San Francisco needs this law. It's an important component of keeping San Francisco a place where everyone can live. And again, I thank the City Attorney's Office and look forward to the trial on Monday. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. President Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Colleagues, today I'm excited to introduce our ordinance for predictable scheduling and fair treatment of formula retail employees, which is part of the San Francisco Retail Worker Bill of Rights, the first part of which was introduced by Supervisor Marr about 2 months ago. The ordinance that we're introducing today would be the first in the country to deal with the issue of unpredictable schedules and unfair last-minute on-call practices that impact significantly hourly low-wage workers. Over a year and a half ago, I proposed San Francisco's family-friendly workplace ordinance, and thanks to you, San Francisco became the first city in our country to establish the right of parents and caregivers to request flexible workplace arrangements. This past summer, President Obama issued an executive order providing this same right to over 2 million federal workers. And as part of the first draft of our family-friendly ordinance last year, we had included provisions to address predictable schedules, but the topic was so challenging that I suggested convening a separate table of stakeholders that has included labor, working family advocates, and employers to specifically address this topic. For much of this year, we've convened this table, and through these discussions, we've learned how unpredictable schedules and last-minute on-call practices threatens economic security, creates work-family challenges, and undermines worker health and well-being. We've also heard about best practices from outstanding local employers who have figured out how to manage predictable schedules, as well as the fact that the largest chain stores and international corporations, typically known in our city as formula retail establishments, have the ability to provide more predictable schedules for their employees with sophisticated, just-in-time scheduling technologies that can auto-generate schedules based on projections of customer and demand. While our economy is doing well for many, we still have too many low-wage workers and families struggling in the midst of our affordability crisis, who struggle in jobs with unpredictable shifts, in part-time limbo, and have barriers to a solid career ladder. We've heard from part-time workers who can't tell their families in any given week when they will work or how much they will earn, who struggle to juggle multiple jobs when work hours are unpredictable. Over the past decade, since 2003, the number of involuntary part-time workers has more than tripled. While our city has been a national leader for a living wage, a higher minimum wage is not enough to lift individuals and families out of poverty. These efforts must also be based on fair and predictable schedules. The ordinance that I'm proposing today will apply to formula retail employers with 20 or more employees in our city, which encompasses about 5% of our city's workforce. The ordinance will do the following. It will require formula retail employers to post schedules 14 days in advance. It will discourage erratic schedule changes and cancellations by requiring employers to provide what we refer to as predictability pay for last-minute schedule changes. Specifically, an hour of pay if changes are made in the last 7 days before a date that a worker is scheduled to work, or 2 to 4 hours of pay if changes are made in the last 24 hours, which is similar to reporting pay time required by the state. Our legislation will also discourage the use of on-call shifts by requiring employers to provide workers with extra predictability pay for on-call shifts canceled at the last minute, as well as provide part-time workers with equal protections for promotions, hourly wages, and time off. I want to thank the many members of the coalition that we've worked with, particularly the staff from Next Generation, the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, UFCW, Jobs for Justice, and many others who've been part of our coalition moving forward. And colleagues, I look forward to discussing this legislation with you. I also want to mention, I know Supervisor Wiener will be discussing a hearing request that I will be joining him on, but very briefly, the topic will be trees, and in particular, the trees that have not been kept up in our city. I want to mention in my district this past week, there was an enormous tree that crashed in the middle of Vallejo Street next to Cafe Trieste. We know that our city's relinquishment policy with regards to trees is just not working. And earlier this year, I had asked colleagues if you could include a specific expenditure in the budget specifically for trees within my district. I know Supervisor Wiener has had serious challenges within his district. My guess is these are challenges that we have faced around the city. We need to do better, and because of that, I join him in calling for the hearing that he will be describing in a few moments.
Thank you, President Chu. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear that Supervisor Wiener is going to be calling a hearing on trees. That's I'd like to add my name to that request. It's a significant problem. It was a ill-conceived idea to transfer all those sick trees to residents. I'd like to close today's meeting in memory of a great man. His name was Mr. Grantland Johnson. Mr. Johnson was the first and only African American elected to the Sacramento Board of Supervisors and was later appointed as a regional director for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And he also served as a cabinet secretary to the California Department of Health and Human Services. Mr. Johnson was widely praised in the community as a thoughtful leader with keen political instinct and a passion to help people in need. He was a familiar face and strong voice in city and county and state policy arenas. He championed the need for diversity and social justice, worked to protect the interests of the working class, and used his position in the political arena to better those lives and the lives that are around him, that were around him. He is survived by his wife, Miss Lee Turner, his daughter Patrice, and two sisters, Catherine Harris and Rose Morris. He will be sorely missed. I also want to recognize that his legacy does live on. Not only do I aspire to continue to fill these great shoes, but also there are organizers here in San Francisco that have known Mr. Johnson for a very long time. The rest I submit, Mr. Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. First of all, I want to wish my colleague, Supervisor David Campos, a very happy birthday. I know it just passed 2 days ago. And then I'd like to introduce a modification to the Trans-Bay Redevelopment Area Plan that would allow the city to receive more money for affordable housing by allowing a developer at 181 Fremont to pay a significant in lieu fee. I know that this issue was in the press in August around concerns about segregating our low-income versus market-rate housing. But I do think that this deal is going to set a huge precedent in the city around a discussion that we've had about charging different rates or varying rates of off-site in lieu fees depending on the types of units that you're building in the city. Currently, if you build a waterfront condo on the 40th floor or an 18-unit building in the Excelsior, you're asked to pay by the city the same offsite in lieu fee, when in fact certain units are much more valuable than others. This negotiation, I think, was a huge success on part of OCII in our city to really set a precedent in terms of the types of dollars that we can expect to see when we allow luxury condo developers to offsite their units. Generally, as a policy, I prefer inclusionary units to be on site, particularly if they are rental units. But this is a case where allowing the developer to pay a fee for the current obligation will result in a significant increase in the number of affordable units that would be funded in the Trans-Bay Area Plan, where we have committed to 35% affordable housing thanks to redevelopment and the state. We have one other affordable housing project that has been completed in the Trans-Bay area, Rene Casanave apartment, and another project under construction at Fremont and Folsom. The original proposal at 181 Fremont was for 11 units out of 74 units to be on site on the top floor of a mixed office and residential building. Under our current in lieu fee structure, the developer would have paid $5.5 million towards affordable housing if they off-sited these 11 units. The Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure negotiated a $13.85 million in lieu fee towards the development of affordable housing in this area, almost 3 times the amount what the developer would have paid in our current in lieu program. This is significantly higher than what's currently allowed and was based on the market value of the residential units versus just the pure number of units that were being built. This fee, instead of building 11 BMR units, where we know that the homeownership association fees would have been in the thousands of dollars per month, thereby precluding any middle-class family from truly living in these BMR units, will now build 69 affordable rental units. So versus 11 on-site units, we are now building 69 affordable rental units. So the net increase is between 44 and 58 new affordable units. Since the majority of the units that will be subsidized by this fee are in the Trans-Bay Block 8, which has a subsidy cap of $200,000 that was also negotiated by OCII, it is safe to say that this fee could actually subsidize up to 58 additional housing units. The majority of these units will be built on the Trans-Bay Block 8, keeping this neighborhood mixed income and not segregating them into other neighborhoods. And Block 8 is located on Folsom between 1st and Fremont Street, just 2 blocks south of the project. OCII has executed an exclusive negotiation agreement with related companies and Tenderloin Neighborhood Development Corporation to build a residential project on Trans-Bay Block 8 designed by OMA and Ferguson Architects. This proposal will now include more affordable housing than originally proposed, with 653 units, of which 177 will be affordable to households earning between 40 and 60% of the area median income, quite low on the AMI spectrum. The items being introduced today will be heard at OCII Commission and Planning, and I want to express my strong support for this agreement, and we'll come back to the Board of Supervisors as a committee of the whole item as we now sit on the remainder portions of redevelopment area plans. This proposal will allow us to get more affordable housing and does set an important precedent of setting a higher offsite fee based on the market value of the units and demonstrates that developers can and will pay higher fees to do offsite affordable units when it generates more money for affordable housing development. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I wanted to join Supervisor Cohen in ending the meeting in honor of Grantland Johnson from Sacramento. As a child growing up in Sacramento and a student activist myself, I had tremendous respect for him. And I did have an ability to meet with him a number of times, but I'll just say that he was so down to earth as well, whether he was working within the Clinton administration or in the Gray Davis administration, but he always took time with grassroots activists like myself. And I think it's important to acknowledge he was only 65 years old and that he passed away based on diabetes and heart failure. And I'm thinking heavily about how diabetes develops in people's lives. But I know if we do nothing today regarding health equity issues like diabetes, 1/2 of the African American population and 1/2 of the Latino population will develop type 2 diabetes in their lifetimes. And there's so many health impacts of that, including 50% more likely to develop Alzheimer's and other issues too. So diabetes should be seen, I think, as a crisis within our communities. I also wanted to add that Grantland Johnson came out of the movements, whether it was student organizing, the anti-apartheid movement, labor. He was a leader in the National Committee to overturn the Bakke decision in the 70s, which was a racial justice effort of united people of color challenging the government to be fairer with equal opportunity programs throughout this country. And whether it was the Del Paso Heights or low-income neighborhoods of Sacramento, he always stood strong, whether he was the activist to when he became a statewide and a nationwide leader, but he will be missed by many of us like myself as well. Also, I'm proud to stand with our president, David Chu, in introducing and supporting the second part of the Retail Workers' Bill of Rights today, and it's significant that it's taken years for many of the worker advocates and policy agencies that he's been working with and the grassroots coalition led by Jobs with Justice and many others that I've been working with to come together with the Part 1 that was introduced 2 months ago, and then this new piece, Part 2, that will hopefully move together as one to ensure that San Francisco supports our part-time formula retail workers. Raising the minimum wage is not enough, as President Chu and others have said. We must also promote full-time employment and stable work schedules, but also to help uplift the tens of thousands of low-wage part-time workers in our city, the vast majority of which are women and people of color. Retail, restaurant, and other service workers are not just living paycheck to paycheck, but also hour to hour and suffering from involuntary part-time work and erratic schedules. San Francisco and cities across this country need a Retail Workers' Bill of Rights to restore a fair work week and increase economic security for tens of thousands of low-wage workers and their families as well. I want to acknowledge that the coalition of partners, in addition to those that Supervisor Chu mentioned, have been leading this effort in San Francisco, but also around the country. Jobs with Justice, ACE, or the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, SOMCAN, the South of Market Community Action Network, Young Workers United, United Food and Commercial Workers, or UFCW, SEIU, Unite Here Local 2, and the San Francisco Labor Council. I wanted to thank my staff, Nick Pagalatos, for his work with this coalition to ensure that we have the strongest possible measure as it goes forward to committees and to this full board. So I'm proud to be working with President Chu and our coalition to develop groundbreaking, historic new policies that will promote fair work schedules and economic security for retail, restaurant, and other service workers in San Francisco. Also, this coming weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, October 3rd through the 5th, is the 14th annual Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival in Golden Gate Park. I know Supervisor Farrell just mentioned that he's planning to go to the family-friendly event. 7 stages, over 100 performers and bands playing. It's from noon to 7, Friday through Sunday. But on Friday from 10:30 a.m. to noon, there's a great program for middle school students. It's wonderful. It's exclusive to them. I don't think they let others into the area. And there's always great performers. In the past, MC Hammer, but this year it's coordinated with the Daniel Pearl World Music Festival as well. So really an educational event for a lot of our middle schoolers. And I wanted to thank Elliot Durham, Don Holliday, and especially Warren Hellman and his family for this generous gift to all of our communities, and especially to the kids of our school district as well. I'm looking forward to my usual Steve Earle and the Dukes, Chris Isaac, and so many of the bands. Great acts this year that might excite some of you are Ryan Adams, Yolo Tango, Lucinda Williams, Built to Spill, Roxanne Cash, T-Bone Burnett. I love a local band called Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down that's performing on Friday as well. X and Social Distortion, but what an amazing, diverse lineup of different performers as well. I'm just reading here on my script here, they're expecting to draw upwards of 700,000 people into District 1 and Golden Gate Park and around the park. So I know that concerns about issues from traffic to noise and disruptions may come from our communities. So there's a neighborhood hotline that anyone can call. It's 415-386-8584. That's 386-8584. I think taking public transportation is critical. I already circled all the bicycle parking areas. I usually go to the valet area. That's the usual spot near Overlook Drive and Transverse Drive. There's also the heavy parking area near Park Presidio Boulevard and Crossover Drive. There's also Fulton and 30th Avenue. That's a big bike area. And right off JFK near Spreckles Lake as well. So there's plenty of bike parking, and public transit is encouraged. Also, if you drive and park on the street, please respect our neighborhoods, whether it's the Richmond Sunset or the Stanton area as well, and don't block driveways, please. Paid parking is also available on a first-come, first-served basis with a few lots that include one, George Washington High School at 32nd Avenue in the Richmond. Argonne Elementary School, they have a lot of parents that will be manning and womaning the parking lot. Also Lafayette School on Saturday and Sunday only, way out there at 36th Avenue and Anza. And Presidio Middle School on 29th and Geary. And lastly, Jefferson Elementary School on the Sunset side at 1725 Irving Street, right at Irving and 19th Avenue. Several of the performances are also going to be streamed live on the festival's website. For those that can't make it, it's www.hardlystrictlybluegrass.com. Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Moore. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. As President Chu mentioned, today I'm introducing a hearing request. I'm going to thank President Chu and Supervisor Cohen for co-sponsoring it, relating to the city's misguided tree relinquishment policy. For those who don't know, and unfortunately in San Francisco there actually is not particularly high public awareness around this, we have basically devised what I think is probably one of the worst possible policies that you can have in order to promote a flourishing, healthy urban forest. The policy is that if you own a home that is adjacent to a street tree, the city is basically going to dump maintenance responsibility of that tree onto you. And that is the case whether or not you planted the tree, whether or not you own the tree, whether or not you want the tree, whether or not you have the physical or financial ability to take care of the tree, and whatever the size of the tree is. And I know for example, in President Chu's district, there are some trees that are 40, 50 feet tall, that it's just absurd that we would ever expect an adjacent homeowner to take care of that tree when it's physically impossible for someone to do that on their own, and very expensive to bring an arborist out. We had a situation in my district where a homeowner had the, I would say normally good fortune, but it became the misfortune of having the gall to own a home next to a strip of city land with 50 trees on it, and the city took the position that it was her responsibility to maintain all 50 of those trees. Fortunately, the city has backed off of that very unreasonable position. The policy is very unfair to property owners, and it assumes that all property owners want trees next to their house and have the ability and the know-how to actually take care of those trees. It is also a recipe for a declining and inconsistent urban forest. Of the 20 largest cities in the United States, San Francisco is number 17 in terms of our canopy cover, and that is because we have prioritized investment in our urban forest, and the relinquishment program is just one example of that deprioritization. Our urban forest is actually shrinking because 4% of trees die every year just in terms of natural attrition, and a lot of property owners understandably don't want new trees next to their home because they're going to be responsible for carrying them and fixing the sidewalk around them and so forth. We need to shift our urban forest policy, our tree policy, so that we expand the number of trees in San Francisco, so that we increase our canopy cover, and so that we have a healthy urban forest with the city city taking care of the trees in a consistent and efficient way, rather than relying on homeowners, which will guarantee that while some people will do a fantastic job, others will either blow it off or do a subpar job, perhaps hiring the cheapest possible arborist. So the purpose of the hearing is to explore the current state of the relinquishment program, where the city sees that program going in the future, when the city anticipates that all of the trees are turned over so that the city has very few trees under its responsibility anymore, and how the city envisions having a thriving urban forest given this policy. This is an important issue, colleagues. I believe that the people of San Francisco care passionately about trees and having a thriving urban forest, and this definitely deserves our attention. And the rest I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Avalos.
Submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Seeing no other names on the roster, that concludes roll call for introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Why don't we now go to general public comment?
At this time, the public may comment generally for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, including items on the adoption without reference to committee portion of the agenda, and excluding items which have been considered by a board committee. Pursuant to Board Rule 4.22, please direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to individual supervisors, and not to the audience. Speakers using interpretation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time. If you would like a document to be displayed on the overhead projector, please clearly state such and remove the document when the screen should return to live coverage of the meeting.
Let's hear from our first speaker.
Good afternoon, President Chu and supervisors. I was reading in the paper they're looking for fresh air in the city, and I thought that'd be perfect because we need a city that's fresher than fresh, exciting. It's so exciting to we. The city's fresher than fresh, district exciting. In the city, thanks to Mayor Lee, it's fresher than fresh. And about the police, about the fire chief, Joanne Hayes White. You know, you can't start a fire without a spark. This fire chief's for hire, even if the city's Joanne Hayes, we're just dancing in the dark, the city's getting older. Here's the joke, here's the wine, and it's on you. We'll stay in this town, and you know the streets will be carving you up all right. Want to change my city, this city district place, and see the city that the laughs on you. Stay on the streets of this city town, and it'll be carving you up all right. Can't start a fire without a spark. This Joanne Hayes White, fire chiefs for hire in the city, and we're gonna have where you left your city heart. And see, I hope you had a nice city September. Hope you had a city great month, and I'll see you in October. And I'm gonna wish you city luck.
Thanks, boss. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, supervisors. The advent of technology has enhanced our quality of life in many ways that was thought to have been unthinkable as early as 20 years ago. I want to take this opportunity to urge all supervisors to examine the benefits of equipping San Francisco Police Department vehicles and officers with surveillance cameras. It's much needed and long overdue. San Francisco is not the Wild Wild West. Police officers risk their lives every day to make our community a safe place to live while enforcing and executing laws in the line of duty. They often become targets of public outcry or lawsuits, citing misconduct, abuse, or excessive use of force as cause of action. By fitting San Francisco Police Department vehicles and officers with cameras, events can be captured and archived, leaving little doubt as to what actually transpired, including whether misconduct, abuse of excessive use of force was evident. Cameras will be helpful for all police officers to remain broad-minded but even-handed. I believe this is a powerful tool that should be added to the arsenal of the San Francisco Police Department. And I urge you to make room in your budget for general funds to facilitate this. Thank you very much.
Next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Victims of the cabal, my name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, 14 meters and 10 blocks from sea level, and I rise today to recapitulate my reasons for presenting these little PED talks, that is politics, entertainment, design. We all must expect that sea level will rise up to 200 feet within the next 200 years. We must understand that we need a carbon accounting regime to facilitate charging the economic entities that create this carbon with the cost of sequestering it. We must expect that desalination of fresh water and distribution over the desert will enable Mother Nature herself to capture this carbon and store it. For further, I apologize for the confusion here. I have a new Facebook page called World Carbon Balance, and you're welcome to review it, or your staff, to find out exactly how we deal with this issue. Thank you. I lost this. That's there. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, John DeDonna from San Francisco. This is entitled Let's Clean Up Our Act. Years ago, when we were a city that knew how, we built a subway system called Muni under the length of Market Street with 2 restrooms in each station, one for men and one for women. We separated the men and women because many men tend to spray all over the place. Anyway, these restrooms are no longer in operation. They haven't been for years. But if you look carefully, you can still find their remains. Is it because we have evolved to the point that we no longer need restrooms? No, it's not that men and women have stopped doing it, because they're doing it all over the place, on escalators, against walls, in the gutters, and on the sidewalks. No, we haven't evolved. We've devolved, to the shame of everyone. Today we're trying to be a first-class city, a great tourist attraction, with ample funds to maintain some of those treasures at some locations. And don't give me that bull that tourists will plant bombs in the restrooms. They can do that in any train in the station. And forget those decocked street toilets. They're out of service most of the time, and they take too long. So let's clean up our act and make this a classy city once again. Thank you for listening.
Next speaker.
My name is Charles Malonson Sr. I'm a member of Local 34 Power Drivers and Bridge Builder, also Local 22. I'm trying to find out what is the problem with the Trans-Bay Terminal. It's supposed to be a federal government job, and it seems like they're having a problem with it. Sometimes when a black worker get on a job, he works one day or either a week, and he's being replaced by a Hispanic that do not live in San Francisco. When I've taken take my time and go down to Mission Hiring Hall and question them. They tell me that they cannot pressure the contractor to hire anyone. I asked him, why do he have a job? And another issue that I have is, I used to live in San Francisco housing and at Robert Pitts, and I was told that since I was behind in my rent, one of the managers by the name of Carla, some money came up missing. When she got fired, a lot of people paying their rent, money orders was stealing in the drawer. She is protected by the union, if she's in the union, to go to the drug rehab to keep her job. I want to know what will happen to the ones that behind in their rent, and why are they behind in their rent? We wasn't informed about it. Someone just came and told us just like that. It wasn't holding a meeting with the resident, letting them know that someone stole our rent money. If it's true, I would like it to be investigated.
Next speaker.
I'd like to put this up on the TV, if I could, and read a letter that I sent to Bobby Hamlin on the 17th of Family Radio. I'm a longtime listener to Family Radio. I've got 10 kids and still miss Ken Boone back in the 70s and 80s and Jerry Edinger at night when I hear Charlie Manu. Not that Charlie doesn't bless my soul too, but to be honest, it vexed my soul when Jerry left. I do not agree that all the churches have fallen away. Just Google John MacArthur or R.C. Sproul, and that will prove it. But on the whole, I believe that 6:10 a.m. is the best, and continue to have the bumper sticker and pass out the old Does God Love You tracts Mr. Camping wrote that does not mention leaving the churches. When Mr. Camping died, I cried a lot, and I loved him more than my own dad, who never got saved, and my mom. But if we could talk with Mr. Camping in heaven, I am sure he would tell us not to teach the end of the church age any longer. The reason I decided to write this letter to you was because Kathleen recommended it, that it'd be better than leaving a message on the answering machine. A few days ago on the news, the CDC was mentioned in a positive light. And several times on Family Radio during the public service announcements time, we are told that the CDC recommends this or that or the other thing for us and our kids' health. But it's recently come to my knowledge that the CDC knew the vaccinations they were recommending for our protection would give autism. Please, Bobby, go to Infowars.com and listen to the interviews Alex Jones has with Dr. Wakefield and Thompson. I don't know if you listen to Prayer Time, but I'm the one who asked Prayer to talk to the San Jose City Council and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I wish you would call me. Maybe I could take you out to Chipotle sometime.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Tom Gilberti, the overhead, please. It's a ranking system. When we want to go from tenants in common, we want to change over. There's a name, AB, age 78 years, owned the property 44, total them up 122 years, ranking. Okay, next person, maybe 50 years of age, owned property 20 years, he's 70, got a ranking of 70. Another person's 30 years of age, he's owned the property 5 years, he gets a ranking of 35. When we want to go tenants in common and switch over, why don't we start at the top with the people that have owned the property the longest? Again, it's frozen, I believe, for 10 years, but it'd be interesting to see where it comes down to, how far down the ranking it goes. The next part of this is going to be called sharing. When people buy the piece of property, say it's $1 million piece of property, and there are 4 people that have lived in this property. I'm
I'm going to call it a 5 equals 3. For every 5 years you've lived there, you get 3% of the sales price. 10 years divided by 5 means you get 2 times 3%, which would make it 6%. 15 years would be 5 times 3, 9%. And if you lived in a property for 25 years, you would get a 15%. That would be of the sales price. Now, on all of those, one person would get $30,000, another person would get $60,000, another person, tenant, would get $90,000, and the person that was there for 25 years would get $150,000. And that would help them move. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. I will be showing some materials here for your viewer. The current September issue of Wired magazine has a cover story and a number of other stories about this person who happens to be Edward Snowden. And on the slightly more than 1 year anniversary of his revelations, I would like to suggest that the supervisors, as well as the mayor's office and every department, need to consider what to do with respect to the implications for everybody's privacy and confidentiality. Bruce Schneier, in an article after the main article, says, by treating the Internet as a giant surveillance platform, the NSA has betrayed the Internet and the world. It has subverted the products, protocols, and standards that we use to protect ourselves. It has left us all vulnerable to foreign governments, to cyber criminals, to hackers. And it has transformed the Internet into a medium that no one can trust. I think it's time for the supervisors and for the city agencies to review what the implications are of the vast and extensive spying that's been going on in the Internet, both by the NSA and by a whole range of other private institutions. The end of this article, I think, is significant. They quote Edward Snowden as saying, "The question for us is not what new story will come out next. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" And I think you should consider strongly what you will do about it for the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak in general public comment?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Jackie Bryson, for people who are new to this planet and don't know who I am. The reason I am here this afternoon is that I got a report from the Whistleblowers Program. It's the annual report for complaints filed January through March of 2014. And I just got this last Friday, so this is the first opportunity I had to share with you what I believe to be loopholes which the Board of Supervisors need to close regarding this particular administrative code, which has not been amended since June 19 of 1998. That's a long time ago. I have the following suggestions. The first one being that there be a 30-day advance notice on-site posting for the dedicated public board of directors meetings for programs receiving SF funding. Agendas be available to the public, and that the word agenda be included in the amendment, because there's nothing requiring agendas for the public. That minutes be provided. There's nothing referring to minutes, that the minutes need to be accurate. Do I have to really say that? Yeah, I do. that the meetings be held in San Francisco. They're receiving San Francisco monies. The meetings need to be held in San Francisco, and there is nothing currently in the code which requires those meetings to be held in San Francisco, and that under the compliance section that it be reworded to say that consider such a material breach as grounds for terminating the contract or not renewing the contract partially or in its entirety, instead of the department can decide whether or not they're going to do this. There needs to be punishment for not being in compliance. And there are nonprofits which constantly.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak in general public comment? Seeing none, general public comment is now closed. Mr. Clerk, could you read our adoption counter?
Items 36 and 37 are being considered for immediate and unanimous adoption without committee reference. These items will be acted upon by a single roll call vote. Unless a member requests discussion of a matter, it shall be removed and considered separately.
Colleagues, let's take these items one item at a time. Mr. Clerk, could you read item 36?
Item 36 is a resolution urging the successful negotiations between the San Francisco Unified School District and the United Educators of San Francisco to avoid a strike and interruption to education of San Francisco students.
Supervisor Marr.
Refer to committee.
Okay, committee. That should be the case. Item 37. Mr. Clerk.
37 is a motion concurring in the rimfire second declaration of local emergency by the mayor and in the actions taken to meet the emergency.
Colleagues, can we take this item same house, same call? Without objection, this motion is approved. And with that, Mr. Clerk, is there any more business in front of the board?
Memoriams on behalf of Supervisors Cohen and Supervisors Marr for the late Grant Len Johnson.
And I want to thank SFGov TV with Nona Melkonian and Jennifer Lau for bringing today's meeting to the homes of San Franciscans. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, unless there's any more business in front of the board, we are adjourned.